Today, Senator Kelly put Pete Hegseth on the defensive by literally making him a defendant in the case of Kelly versus Hegseth, filed in federal court in Washington, D.C., asking a federal judge to stop Pete Hegseth. Senator Kelly respectfully asks this court to declare the censure letter, reopening determination, retirement grade determination proceedings, and related actions unlawful and unconstitutional, to vacate those actions, to enjoin their enforcement, and to preserve the status of a co-equal Congress and an apolitical military.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. We had Senator Kelly on the show a few weeks ago talking about Pete Hegseth's decision to prosecute him for telling the truth in a video directed towards those serving in the military, reminding them that they have a right, in fact, an obligation to refuse illegal orders. I don't know what Secretary Hegseth was expecting, but if he thought for one moment that Mark Kelly would back down, he's never met a Navy pilot. On Monday, Senator Kelly fired back.
Today I'm fighting back. Pete Hegseth is coming after what I earned through my 25 years of military service in violation of my rights as an American and as a retired veteran and as a United States Senator whose job it is to hold him and this or any administration accountable. Now, Pete Hegseth wants our longest-serving military veterans to live with the constant threat that they could be deprived of their rank and pay years or even decades after they leave the military just because he or another Secretary of Defense doesn't like what they've said. That's not the way things work in the United States of America, and I'm not going to stand for it. So today, I filed a lawsuit against the Secretary of Defense because there are few things as important as standing up for the rights of the very Americans who fought to defend our freedoms.
What's important to understand about the so-called case against Mark Kelly is that it rests on absolutely nothing. The fact that the Department of Defense has walked back every threat made against Senator Kelly that would have required a court, even a military one, to examine the facts is evidence of just how empty Hegseth's case is. I asked Kris Goldsmith, Army vet and founder of Veterans Fighting Fascism, to help explain this for us. Kris, welcome to the show. You had another viral Instagram post about the persecution of Mark Kelly. And the thing that I want folks to pick up on is, and this is sort of the MO of the administration. They come out guns blazing. They say they're going to court-martial or go to the mat, go to the extreme. And then they don't have the goods. They don't have the stomach for it. And frankly, they don't have the competence to pull it off. So all of those initial threats against Mark Kelly, which included death by hanging, by the way, they have now walked that back to what is still a ridiculous and unjustified administrative punishment. We both know a little bit about that. Can you explain what an admin punishment like this is and why it's the last recourse when you don't have evidence?
Yeah. So the key word that you used there was persecution. You didn't say prosecution because he's not being prosecuted. He didn't do anything illegal. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, is accusing Senator Mark Kelly, a retired Navy captain, of basically being an insurrectionist, right? He's like trying to gaslight Americans into believing that Mark Kelly, a senior military officer, saying that it is the duty of service members, the legal responsibility to refuse unlawful orders, that is somehow undermining the good faith and operations within the military. That's ridiculous. The goal here is not to intimidate just Mark Kelly. It's to intimidate everyone who's ever retired from the military. It is the reason why we have seen so many former high-ranking military officers kind of go silent. There are only a few exceptions. You know, we had General Milley, Kelly, and Mattis all right before the 2024 election saying, yes, this man who we worked very closely with and we're close to on a daily basis, he is a fascist. You should not reelect him because he is a fascist ruler and he has fascist tendencies. They've all kind of gone relatively silent. And that is not because they don't think that their voice carries weight. It's because they're afraid. And they have very real reasons to be afraid.
We had General Honore on yesterday who added another element to that, a pretty depressing one, which is that the financial hit that these guys, and he was talking about, I'm searching my memory here. Yeah, it was all men, tough guys, supposedly. But when you make it onto the boards of these Fortune 50 companies, when you're getting $20K per speaking engagement, and when those threaten to dry up because you're speaking out against the regime, the powers that be, it's a real disincentive. I mean, it wouldn't be for me. It certainly isn't for General Honore, but he came right out and said after he worked for the January 6th committee, his speaking engagements dried up by 50%. And that's real income for these guys. I just put that out there, not to add to people's cynicism, or maybe to add to people's cynicism. Just because you're wearing a uniform does not mean you're brave.
Yeah. And this is this like complying in advance out of fear thing is something that we often criticize and we often condemn people for. But at the end of the day, human beings are generally self-interested. Now, I believe in selfless service to a fault. That is why I still run 2 nonprofits that are unfunded. That's why I do all of these silly things that I do. I'm punishing myself in many ways. I recognize that most human beings are not motivated in that way. And I can understand that the average former military officer, from a flag officer who isn't a household name, who wouldn't be able to go post a video on social media and raise $1 million in defense. Like I'm sure Senator Mark Kelly probably has gotten a ton of donations since this has come out. I can understand that they don't want to go through this process because the process itself is the punishment. Now, if they were to be court-martialed, like, yes, that's expensive. Yes, you'd have to have a lawyer, but you'd get your day in court and you would be cleared, right? But this administrative process, it makes the defense against what Pete Hegseth and his lackeys within the Pentagon are doing, makes it a lot more difficult. It makes a lot, you don't have the rights to appeal to a jury of your peers to show your innocence. These administrative processes are decided in-house. And if you have the Secretary of Defense saying this is the way this needs to happen, it's very likely that that's the way this is going to happen.
At the start of this year, I had one of those rare moments when things slowed down just enough to take stock. I was with people I care about, looking around, thinking, this is good and it's worth protecting. Not just the relationships, but the life we're building together. And that's where the weight comes in. Protecting the people who matter most, planning for the future, it can feel overwhelming, especially when insurance turns into a maze of fine print and sales pressure. That's why I trust Policy Genius. Policy Genius isn't an insurance company. It's an online marketplace that helps you compare quotes from some of America's top insurers side by side for free. Their licensed team works for you, not the insurance companies. So the guidance is actually about your needs. No guesswork, just clarity. They help you find the most affordable policy that fits your life. They answer your questions, they handle the paperwork, and they advocate for you the whole way through. And it's no surprise they have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. Plan for the year knowing you've protected what you've built. With Policy Genius, real users have gotten 20-year, $2 million policies for just $53 a month. Head to policygenius.com/Ken to compare life insurance quotes from top companies and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Ken. It's Ken Harbaugh with a quick break to tell you about something new coming to the MeidasTouch network. Meidas Defense, serious coverage of the military, national security, and real threats at home and abroad. No spin, no talking points, just expert voices and on-the-ground reporting. Check out Meidas Defense, coming soon to the MeidasTouch network. even the threat of it, or in your case, the threat of an investigation imposes burdens.
Mm-hmm.
The tweet that disgraced General Michael Flynn put out on Christmas Day, in which he said he called the director of the FBI personally. He messaged the president through Susie Wiles to investigate you fully and without mercy. That imposes costs on you, even if it's bluster.
Yep.
Even if the threat to hang Kelly and the 5 members of Congress he appeared with was pure bluster. We talked to Senator Slotkin about this. We talked to Mark Kelly about this. It's part of the strategy, imposing these costs on critics of the regime, even if they don't result in prosecutions.
Yeah, and we've seen this just recently with Governor Tim Walz,
right?
Who's one of my favorite people in the world. Him deciding not to run for re-election again as governor because the costs are just simply too high. Now, what the headlines have been saying is, I don't think the full truth. And frankly, what Tim Walz has been saying himself, I don't think is the full truth. I know him to be a deeply caring and sensitive man. I worked with him a lot when he was in Congress. In fact, he was the author of most of, if not all of the bills that I have ever passed, including my very first one, which was to help veterans who got kicked out of the military with an administrative process that they couldn't stop without the right to a jury of their peers, right? I really appreciate Tim Walz for being a former command sergeant major, willing to stand next to another enlisted soldier and go against the Pentagon and go against the veteran community. Back then, 10, 15 years ago, was not cool with helping out vets who got bad paper discharges. But Tim Walz has had people driving by his house, these regular MAGA people, filming themselves to post on their personal Facebook. And I'm not talking about like MAGA influencers, just regular MAGA people filming themselves driving by Tim Walz's house, shouting the R slur at his house because they think this is funny. His daughter has been the recipient of tons of death threats. That is the cost of opposing the regime right now. The headlines are saying this is about, there's, investigations into, childcare in Minnesota. That's not the reason that he's backing off. He's backing off because the personal costs are too great. It's not he's a political coward, as I've seen some people on our side, starting to say. The man has dedicated his entire adult life to serving our country and his community and his state. And it eventually reaches a point where you can't put your kids through this. And that is what General Flynn is trying to do to me. General Flynn, this disgraced, convicted felon and insurrectionist, called me an insurrectionist and tried to report me to the FBI, someone who regularly works with the FBI and provides them evidence of criminality. We are living in the upside down. It is absolutely absurd. Thankfully, I've got a high threshold for pain and I'm not going to be intimidated, but I'm human too. Eventually, if there were to be some sort of IRS investigation that demanded, an audit like they did to the former FBI director, that type of thing, like that's going to ruin my life. And that is not off the table. Like these are things that could happen, not because General Flynn got through to Kash Patel or Susie Wiles and a conspiracy was hatched at the highest levels of government, but because, some random IRS agent or FBI agent who is influenced by disgraced former General Mike Flynn might take it upon themselves to just go after me. Yeah. Because, the FBI has been instructed to treat Antifa, which I am, as a terrorist group. So these are all real threats that I have to deal with.
We try to end on a positive note here, and I want to keep this one to a single part episode. Try, if you can, to imagine 30 years from now, if we flip the House this year, if we vanquish Trumpism in 2028, I mean, I try to look at these things these days through a more historical lens. And Trumpism already seems to be on its last legs if you look at just how deeply unpopular all of its policies are. And I just imagine a day not too far in the future when those clowns driving by Tim Walz's house disavow themselves of any relationship to MAGA. People burn their hats or they bury them. They pretend in 30 years, you won't be able to find a Trump voter anywhere, is my prediction.
Yeah. I hope that you are right. This country has a habit of not punishing its insurrectionists. We saw this after the Civil War. That's why Reconstruction didn't work. That's why, racist terrorist organizations like the KKK were allowed to flourish for over a century. But with that said, the reason I'm still in this fight is because I think we can win. I do believe that in time, the side of justice, the side who appreciates real democracy, the side who looks to our Constitution and our Bill of Rights as a founding to build a more perfect union. We weren't perfect when we started, and we never will be, but we can try to be. I think that we're on the path towards achieving that. And what does that mean? That means that people who are running for office, people who are supporting candidates for office, especially at the national level, you need to vet them and make sure that they are prepared to go on offense. That means things like impeachment of Donald Trump, impeachment of Pete Hegseth, investigations like Pete Hegseth deciding to use his power as the Secretary of Defense to punish a member of Congress, an astronaut, or probably one of the most respected veterans in this country. That I think is an impeachable offense. Impeach Kristi Noem for setting, ICE out as a secret police force. These are all things that we can do to impose costs on the current administration. But moving forward, we also need to go on offense in doing things like eliminating the filibuster, expanding the Supreme Court, creating more districts and more courts so that the court system isn't completely overburdened all the time. And it means doing things like making DC a state. You get rid of the filibuster, you make DC a state. Now you don't have to worry about like the Lisa Murkowskis and the Susan Collins and the Senator Kings of the world. You'll have two more Democrats who are going to vote for the side of democracy. We should explore things like making Puerto Rico a state, the U.S. Virgin Islands. The MAGA world wants more states, right? They're putting these memes up of Venezuela and of Greenland as new states. So let's meet them halfway and let's make some new states, DC and Puerto Rico. 4 more senators who will reliably vote in favor of protecting democracy and the health and well-being of the American people.
I love it. I think you should write a book and put all of that in there. It's a heck of a roadmap. Thanks, Kris.
Thank you, brother.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.